Alright. Hey y'all. I'm Way. This is going to be the first episode of an Arcane Ascension. And I'm going to share a little bit about my story today. This one's probably going to be a little bit different than I would kind of have an idea of the format going and flowing, because today it's just going to be me talking, and there's no one else. So I'm going to get started and just share a little bit about my experience with awakening, enlightenment, ascension, whatever you want to call it, spiritual experiences, mystical experiences, and all that. So for me, in this life, I didn't come in to this life like seeking something spiritual or really having that connection. I hear some people share that wasn't really the experience here. I guess there was some kind of knowingness, something there, but there was always like an emptiness, a lack, and knowing that this wasn't it. I always believed in kind of more mystical, magical stuff, and knew that we really limited ourselves within this realm in some way, and there had to be more. So, other than that, there wasn't anything super profound. I grew up Christian background, United Methodist. I obviously went to church and Sunday school, all that. Some of it resonated, some of it didn't. Some of it was like there was contradictions in what I saw the adults believe at that point. They said they believed in all these old school miracles and back in the day, but then clearly Jesus said these things and more you shall do. And this wasn't the type of mindset and the belief that these people had. They very much contradicted themselves, and that was very prevalent. That was obvious. It was like, well, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth here, guys. You're saying you believe this, and there was weak attempts at justification in the church and whatever. I don't want to spend too much time going into that, but just it didn't resonate in the fullest. It was more of a, if anything, that fear-based, like, oh well, I need to believe this because if I don't believe this, I don't want to go to hell. Now that sounds bad. Any child with any bit of sense knows they don't want to go to hell and burn for all eternity, right? So, well, let's go with the other option then. Oh, Jesus is the guy. Okay, we'll go with that, sure. So that was that, and not really, for years, not a whole lot of question of that, but then at the same time, not a whole lot of faith, you could say, real sincere, devotion and commitment to that. That never really was the case. Even as I became a teenager, that wasn't there, and addiction took hold very quickly when I became a teenager. Found substances, originally alcohol, marijuana, sex. I remember thinking that a while back. I think it was within a couple months period when I was a teenager, probably about 13 or 14, that I started, all within maybe a month period, I started smoking pot, drinking, having sex, and selling drugs. And it was just like boom. That was the platform, and that was it. Very self-indulgent, hedonistic lifestyle, and that was that was it. That quickly took over and consumed the whole mentality. That drove the show. And in hindsight, obviously looking back, it's just that egoic kind of survival pack mentality that was way prevalent early on, and that ran rampant. Just got to fit in and survive and be with the popular. I was popular, and fit in, and so that was safe. That was safe, and that was where I needed to be. And that story, it kind of consumes, obviously, because that's not the way it is. And addiction, I was an IV drug user. That escalated very quickly. Went into heavy drug use for years and years, and just that escape, that euphoria and escape, that was it. It's like I remember the first time like doing for here, the first substance used was alcohol. And the very first time I did that, I remember knowing it was like this is it. This is the magic that had been a secret. You know, this was the magic of the world that had been hidden. It's like, oh man, there is magic here. This is it, guys. You know, it's it. This makes us feel like, oh man. So, and yes, that is magic. However however you want to label it, it is what it is. Whether it's dark green magic or what, however you want to look at it, it is what it is. So that was the life then, and by the time I was 20, early 20s, I was in and out of like rehabs and struggling with that, and by grace I got clean at like 24, and was introduced to 12-step movements, and that was really my first real kind of introduction to what I would call like applied spirituality, really. You know, it's like this application of actually applying this and living this and committing to this way of life. And it wasn't like, even that, looking back, it was never something that was like I was excited for that. I didn't come into that like, or get like, enthused spiritually. It was just more like, well, this is how I've got to live so I don't go back to that, right? If I want to have a quote unquote normal, happy, successful life, then this is going to be something that has to be implemented and done in order to do that. Otherwise, I'm going back to this chaos, this hell, this death. Don't want that. So it was just very much like the ends justified the means, not a very like sincere, heartfelt desire to really live that way, other than a sort of superficial this is what's good for me mentality, right? And that was it. It just was what it was. So I stayed in that for a couple of years, and really just got kind of disillusioned with that because of my own, you could say, insincerity. I was not sincere. It was not there. It was still coming from me doing this because I want to get this out of it. Because if I don't, and really there's a lot of fear in that. Like, if I don't do this, this is going to happen. Oh my God. Like, so I have to. And then there's like that almost begrudging, having to do it. That very much became the mindset. Let's see, 5-6 years of that, I got very depressed, very depressed. I got all the things right in the world. Like, I got the good job, the house, the family. This stuff started to line up, and I had these things in the world. And so it's like I had done this to get this, and now I have it, but I'm not happy. That was a very, very miserable, empty place, because now what? And I didn't have an answer at that point. There was a lot of depression, suicidal thoughts, all that. So that, I don't know, that went on for probably maybe a year or two. And, just kind of going through the motions still. And then it's just like, it faded out. It's like, you know what? Not doing any of this. Not doing it. And started smoking pot, and smoked pot for a couple months, and went with that. And it was, was happy. It was like, all right, cool, no harm, no foul, doing good. And then something happened along the way. I was introduced to certain understandings, and here it came in the form of Freemasonry. I was introduced to that. I'm not a Freemason. I never was. My grandfathers were. One of them had left a bunch of literature, and I had found this literature, and so I started reading that. And then at the same time, I started watching, just randomly started watching a couple like documentaries on Amazon Prime or something. I think one of them was like Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds. Um, and there's a lot of connections that I started making with different religions, understandings of uh, quantum mechanics, non-duality, and really the underlying premise of all religions, that perennial understanding that's there. And it's like, all right, cool. It wasn't anything serious, just like an intellectual interest, right? It's like, this is, okay. It's like, oh, wow. And then it's like more of a kind of started more of the Buddhist, Hindu context started coming aware of that, started floating in, and then they were seeing like, okay, well, this is aligning with what Jesus was saying, and he was saying this, and they're all saying the same thing, kind of, and really seeing that. And still, this is not really taking anywhere other than, up here, intellectual knowledge, like, cool, now I know some shit. And that was it. And I was reading the Bible one day, kind of with this new curiosity. Did develop a curiosity, a hunger, an intellectual thirst and curiosity for this truth, for this knowledge, for this wisdom. So that very much started to take root and take hold. And I don't know that I really recognized that in the fullness that it was really blossoming at the time, but in hindsight, big time. So one day after this kind of broader understanding and context is there intellectually, I'm sitting there reading in my bedroom at the time, and was reading the Bible, and got to a part, I believe it was in Matthew, it's probably in a couple of the Gospels, this verse, and he asked, one of the disciples asked Jesus why he spoke in parables. And he said, right now you don't understand, but at a later date you'll understand. And coinciding with me reading this, there was a profound and immediate eruption, you could say, or I will say, an eruption of energy, presence, this intense, just from my very inner being, just exploded up and out. You see that kind of toroidal, flow. It was really like that. It really was. It was just like boom. Outside of me is everything, and simultaneously, all like this energy, this peace, this. Like I said, I think I went into a little bit of my drug history. I've done psychedelics and IV drug use and anything you name under the sun almost. And this immediately made all that look like child's play. It was a joke. All that was an absolute joke, and just paled in comparison to this presence, this energy. It was so obvious that anything else was just trying to mimic an aspect of this. And it was overwhelming, but at the same time, completely comforting and normal. And I was saturated in peace and presence and power of God. That's people, how do you know it's the presence of God? And I heard another teacher say this, well, that's a stupid question, because when you're there, you're there. And I mean, broke down on the ground, got down on my knees, just so much, just energy, joy, presence, just thankful, gratitude, and it was just like this never-ending fountain of that. I went outside and sat in this little garden area I had, and this little bee flew up. He just stopped there. It was like all of a sudden he was suspended in and outside of time. And in that moment, I could see that God was ever present as all things, had and would always be. For that not to be the case is an impossibility. An impossibility. And this was just the most profound, beautiful thing. Again, and it's just, I was in that, just beauty and joy and love. And, this went on. I don't know, this lasted for a couple of hours before, and this is how it was like before the egoic mind caught back up, before some psychic attacks started coming in. And then it was like, it's like that shadow of a doubt. That was really it. That's the best way to label it. That comes in, starts being entertained. Well, what is this? What's going on? What really happened? Why are you losing your mind? Is this a genuine experience, or and so all this is like called into question, and with that, all these doubts, all these fears, all this uncertainty, what if, needing to know, what is this experience? I need to label this. I got to know what this is, right? And so I didn't really, again, all this was very new. I had just opened the doors, and as this experience, like I was just saying, this kind of unfolded as I was reading the Bible. So this was my original kind of upbringing in this life. This was the wider only kind of context I really had in the fullness as far as religions go. So I sought to understand it from that perspective. Rightly so. I dove into Old Testament prophecy, New Testament prophecy, all kind of things. And if you've ever read any Old Testament prophecy or New Testament prophecy, that shit's crazy. And I don't mean that in like a bashing way. I just mean if you read it, it's crazy. You have to acknowledge that is some crazy shit. And this did not lead me into a very good space, because with that, it very much started to mimic a manic episode. And it was like all these potentialities, all these possibilities, all these timelines. And also to backtrack real quick, there was, with that first unfoldment, there was a lot of what I didn't have a context for this at the time, downloads that started coming through. And immediately, some of the things, when I was reading and when I saw this Bible, when I saw certain verses, it was like I was looking at basic mathematical equations, right? So if you look and see 2 + 2 = 4 written, on something, your brain, you don't question that. You register that, you see that, and it's like, yes, true, that's right. So that's the only way I could explain that, is like looking at certain verses. You see the truth in it, the obviousness of it, the irrefutability. There's no need to try to deny the truth of that. That's simple. It's like I could see that. And with that, there was certain downloads started coming through, and certain things to do with reincarnation, with what I would later start to understand and call transmutation, having the, why were we limited now? Why isn't there the widespread potentiality for the miraculous on this earth anymore? And it was the insights to see that, to do with all these belief systems and energetic gridlocks, fears within the collective that had been invested in and embedded in the human psyche, in our very being, that we were going to have to face and resolve and look at and acknowledge to get through, to be beyond these, to get rid of these limitations. So all these downloads and understandings just started coming, boom, 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 boom. And so then, there's the context when I was going into the prophecy. It's like, well, how does this? You start going into the Old Testament and biblical prophecies too. They talk about reincarnation. There's stuff in that. A lot of Christians don't like to acknowledge that today, but there is when you read the Bible. There's obvious references to that. And so then there was a very big grandiosity that started to take hold, because all the references in the biblical understanding, these are famous biblical prophets, and so there was a grandiosity, like, oh, what if oh man, you mean I could be? It's kind of like Alan Watts was, not kind of, very much. Alan Watts talks about like the random guy that wakes up in Alabama. I kind of resent that because I'm in South Carolina, down deep south too. So he talks about the random Joe Blow that wakes up in somewhere and doesn't have the context and thinks he's Jesus. That was very much the experience. It was like, oh man, we're all that, we're all Jesus, but I know it. It was that grandiosity started to take hold. What if I'm this? What if I'm that? What's my destiny? What am I purpose? What if I can't do it? Oh my God. And it was like, oh my gosh, craziness. By grace, I still had enough sanity to know, and enough clarity, because all these different potentialities started flowing through, and it was like, what the hell? I knew it was like, well, time out, man. Like, you mean to tell me it's like, well, all this isn't possible, right? For me, like, it's like, because it was all very, very self-centered, right? Very, very, self-centered and grandiose as to, like, in reference to me and my purpose. And so there was no, like, it was like, oh man, what am I going to do? What if I don't? What if I can't do this? What if I can't do that? What if I fail? All this. But at the same time, there was still this profound comfort, because that the original experience never really dissipated in fullness. There was still this peace and this new bliss presence, but then there was, like, it was trying to be covered up by this new level of, like, agitation, this new energy. And I had no clue how to deal with that at this time. It was like, I was just slowly starting to get consumed and sucked into that. And by grace, I was aware and could see that, like, hold up, cuz you got to, like, we got to do something. We got to talk to somebody that's, like, preferably somebody that's not going to have us committed. Because at this time, I didn't know I didn't have a community. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And by grace, I did. I found someone. I was, I had a good friend that had been introduced and ran into somebody that had had a similar experience, and had started discussing and talking about this from the context of non-duality, and specifically from the context of devotional non-duality or non-dual devotion. And I had no, like, here, when I was just getting going, I had no like background in meditation and any of this. So it was very new, very foreign. I had no, like, baseline of where to start. And that was just laid out. It just happened. Things fell into place to where it was understandings of energetic processing, what would become the basis for the understanding of transmutation, how to step into a place of witnessing. And then in hindsight, this is funny, because I was able to see in hindsight to where a lot of these capacities had started to come online and take hold way before I had the context for them, before this experience. It was like, I remember months and months before I started to, like, start to really apply, like, in settings of, like, social anxiety or something, or any type of fear that would arise. I started to realize, like, I could observe that within me. And I could allow that, but then not come from that place. So this information, this stuff was already coming online and taking hold prior. There had been a big heart opening prior to that I was not aware of. I remember, like, from months before that, I'd be sitting there like watching movies and like this profound, just connection and just beauty of like any type of like, profound heart connection in the movie, like forgiveness and love and unity. On that level, it was like, oh man, I could relate to that, and the beauty and sincerity and joy was just so intense. That connection was there. And so in hindsight, I could see where all that was like leaking through and coming online prior to this big experience, this big shift. And I do label it, I recognize it now, that there was some type of kundalini pranic energy that was unleashed, however you want to, came unlocked, however you want to label it. So that kind of that was my initiation. I didn't really look at it at that time either as like an initiatory experience, but that very much so, that was it. We all have these types of experience to where nobody can go through that for you. You have to go through your own initiation, and there's not really one, two that are alike, guys, in the exact entirety. Sure, we have overlappings, we have similarities, and that was where I struggled a little bit for a long time, because as I started to take in all like vast different spiritual traditions and understandings and other people's experience, in my experience, it wasn't, I never really could find the exact, like, certain labels. Yes, it's like, all right, yeah, that's similar, that's close, they're that's, yeah, but not exactly. And that's the beauty of it. That's one of the points I want to have this platform, is because that's so prevalent, guy. That's just the way it is. That's the beauty of it. We're not here to have the exact same experience. We're not here to have the exact same unfoldment. We're not here to go through the exact same traditions and applications and understandings and practices and the same, the same lineup that everybody else did. No. That's not the case. But yeah, we can take and we can see the similarities. We can see what does line up and overlap. And that's beautiful. And, we can see where it doesn't. And that's beautiful too. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So, I would say the original understandings that I came across were more in line with, non-duality, A Course in Miracles, that context of forgiveness. I started doing A Course in Miracles. That was something that was recommended to me as an entry into meditation, actually, because I didn't have any meditation practice, and I did have a Christian background, and that is one of the bigger, more well-known Christian, whether that whole community acknowledges it as non-dual or not, Christian non-dual meditative programs. And it's not just a meditative program by any means, but that is part of the workbook. There's a lot of that's part of that. So that was what was adopted here, and I did that for a couple of years. Very committed. I say very, that's relative, I guess, but pretty committed as I could be. I did do that daily for like two and a half years. I think I did the workbook through like 2.5 times or something. I don't know, but it's not really important. That's just that's it. So that understanding, that application of transmutative forgiveness and applying that, and that was something that I had that took hold and was adopted and applied, and still is to this day. That's something that doesn't once that becomes a way of life, that doesn't really fall away. We don't go back to, well, depending. Once you start to be with and handle and process fear energies in a certain way, you don't go back to getting caught up in that old cycle again, and you don't want to go back to those ways. So a lot of the simpler practices that I adopted, I find are still in place to this day, because what's closest to truth lasts the longest. That's what they say. And I became a part of a community. I did have a teacher, Andrew Hewson. He was my teacher at this time. He's no longer teaching. He did have a teaching for a couple of years, Non-Dual Devotion. The channel's no longer up on YouTube. He does have some talks and interviews still up. So I had that guidance. I had a community, and that went on for a couple of years. That was in place, and we had a community that eventually started up and formed, and got to spend some time in that and live in that life, and that was a whole experience. That was a whole part of my journey. I got to see people, live and apply the same thing I was. And that was very beautiful, to share in that, to join in that. That came to an end, somewhat abruptly. And that was something that I thought, would continue on and would be a part of the life for on out. And then it, when it phased out, when it ended, then what? And that was where the basic practices, it's like, okay, well, what sticks around, right? And before I go too much further, I want to go back to how, when I started applying this aspect of transmutative forgiveness and having these non-dual metaphysical understandings, there was a lot of negation that was in place, because the original experience here was one of a lot of, you could say, feminine unfoldment of subtle perception and awareness, and that was just like boom, so ungrounded, so just out there. So there had to be that level of more kind of masculine negation, groundedness, to be with that in an intelligent way, to not be consumed in that, to not just get caught up in the whirlwind, in the tornado, and just So, but then at the same time, there was a complete, there was a lot of stuff that was being shut out and ignored out of fear. Did I recognize that at the time? No, I would try to label it as wisdom. I'm negating this out of wisdom. I don't want this in my experience. I don't know. No, this isn't real. Maya, the illusion. It's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. All an illusion. Right? Sure, that's an aspect of that. There's a level of truth to that. I'm going to deny that. The universe is mental. Are we creating our own reality? Yes. Are we co-creating our own reality too and sharing in that? Yes. So it is both there. Is it all an illusion? are there vast levels and layers to that illusion? Yeah. Can we see those things? Can we experience those realms and beings within those realms? Yes. This was something that I shut out for a long time. And when these types of experiences started to come back online, excuse me, after years, because it was, I mean, I went through years of like in this just kind of more masculine, peace, bliss, non-dual, space. And hindsight's 2020, so I have the maturity and understanding. I can look back and see, sure, where the ego clung on and just latched on to its certain identity out of fear and didn't want to deal with stuff at the time. What are you gonna do? And maybe that there's an intelligence to that, because when you're not ready to look and face stuff, you're not ready to look and face stuff. You really can't. You can't force things before you can try. That often doesn't work well. So, I don't look and I don't see anything as wrong or out of place now, though certainly I've had to deal with and look at where that didn't always seem to be the case. You can beat yourself up and judge yourself after the fact and look at the past and go, it could have been different, should have been, this wasn't, this really didn't serve in the highest the way I thought it did. That's what good does that do? Because it really does all serve. And once you can actually experience that and come to the place where that is really, really the experience, because and the simplicity of that is just dumb, because like you wouldn't be here. You had to have every single experience prior, right, to be here now. You had to. Otherwise you'd be different, right? It'd be different. So that was required. That's necessary. But when this more feminine unfoldment started coming back online, the subtle perception, I was terrified, man. It was like all of a sudden this like all these, and I'd heard about it for years and years. I just didn't think that was going to be some part of my experience. Heard teachers talk about past life recognition, and I was just like, I got a big block. I ain't never gonna, none of that. And subtle perception and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds fun, great, psychic abilities, powers, whatever. Cool. But I also looked at these things as distractions, stuff to be avoided, pitfalls. Stay away from that. Stay far away. And in that, there's a level of fear that gets developed. So it's like we're keeping this away because there's fear. Defense. And that's basic ACIM too. They're saying attack and defense. Defense is attack. When I defend, I'm attacked. And we don't see the depth of that until we can. So there's no use beating yourself up. It's again, it's just like a built-in safety mechanism. You're not ready to see what you're not ready to see yet, guys. And so that had to be part of my experience. And when these things started coming online, and these things, I'll get. I don't want to be too vague. Like past life recall. There were certain clear things that started to seep through, and they came through first in very profound, like overwhelming emotional experiences and connections. It's like, oh my gosh, how have I not seen this before? I remember I had this huge one with my dog. I was aware I'd been with my dog in a past. She'd been a horse in a different life, and I'd been with her, and I'd lost her, or I'd left her. And it was just like all this like grief and sadness and just profound, and not wanting to face that. And then there started to be, everybody loves to talk about the good past lives too, y'all, for the record. That's a great thing. Nobody's ever Hitler in a past life or anything like that. No, we've never done anything shitty. We're all great people here for our last life because we're so great, right? And I'm not saying you're not great or you're not innocent, but so that was that was very much the context I had too. And so then when I have this past life stuff that's contradicting that, all of a sudden I got some, not so nice stuff seeping through from past lives where, you might have been responsible for a whole lot of creation of black magic and murder and nasty shit. Oh, then we really don't want to look at that. We really need to put those walls up there and stay away from that shit. So I started, that kind of was the case, and this, I'd say about a year ago, this started. Yeah, that would have been about September, October of 23 when this type of stuff started coming in real heavy, real profound. Um, there had never been a big interest like that. I was introduced to like channeling, and I was big into the law of one and things like that. Those were part of the understanding here, and so that was always, in the field, but like for me personally, for that being something that I was interested in or for me gonna do or be involved in, nah, that's, we're past that. We don't need to worry about that, better than that. And this wasn't like a super, I'm very spiritual, I'm not better than anybody. But, we got these subtle little things there we don't like to acknowledge and admit and see. And, certainly, so that was something that started to come through here, and then in the group context that I was still around to at the time, the community. Channeling and stuff was coming through more prevalently, and the correlation with channelings with certain ET communities, ET beings, and groups and stuff like that. So that was something that was aware. I had like a first visual experience. I don't think I've ever shared this not on any video. I had a first visual experience of a you would call it an interdimensional. At the time, I would say it showed up more as interdimensional, so I will use that opposed to extraterrestrial or alien. Interdimensional beings, and the first ones that I saw were the reptiles, reptilians, and this was not something I was like looking for. I was at a talk and at the community I was with, and just sitting there. I wasn't the one talking. I wasn't the one speaking. Somebody else was, and all of a sudden it was just boom to the side. It's like like in a medical room or interrogation room where you got this like window panel of like people that are just looking through, and lo and behold, it's fucking reptiles. It's the reptilians, they're sitting there and they're just observing. They're not like menacing looking. They're just, it's more of, I had the understanding that they were more of like just, this bunch was more of a kind of technological, medical, scientific. This is more of like a scientific branch or group that was just observing in a certain way. And I became aware of them for a second, and then it was like, it was fine. They really weren't like menacing or like anything like that. That was pretty clear. But then my conception of like, the negative reptilians with the negative bad ETs, that came into my mind. And when that came in, fear, the fear was in my system, and it was like, boop, the panel disappeared. And it's like, oh, okay. And it was very normal. I don't even know. I don't even remember if I told it. It was so normal and so like whatever at the time. I don't even think I made a big deal about it or like told anybody for a couple of days. I really don't. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But it wasn't like, it was whatever. And there ended up being like a little bit more of an experience with that one. That was, I did have some more contact with one of those beings. Did become aware it was like an aspect of a positive, they were basically slaves, and they had been caught up in a, with a branch of negative negative beings, and they had served with them and had basically been forced, into that and lived into that, and they wanted to get out. They wanted to step into a way of service to others out of service to self. And this was part of that path for them. This was part of them. I could see where they had assisted in my life up until this point. They had assisted like other things that had lined up. They had been a part of that. They had been a part of the orchestration of, allowing things to line up in a certain way. And so there was a profound, then there was the seeing where they were freed. I saw where they had been freed and they were no longer bound to the group that they had been bound to anymore. They had earned and gotten a level of their freedom back through their service to in my life, and a larger commitment. I don't want to say it was just like in association to my life. Obviously, that was the only context. That was the context that was relevant here. But I have the feeling their level of service went way beyond that. And sorry, it's whew, choke up there. Because there is so much judgment, in the field around certain types of beings and groups, and generalizations that we make with those, and excuse me, that's not always the case, guys. Not always the case, and even when we think we do, there is such a thing as redemption and salvation of beings get to a point where they can have another choice. There's not always that point of no return for them, right? So that's important. It's important to hold that level of understanding and love and forgiveness there, and to see where we do hold. You can't ignore the generalities and the the depth of pain and judgment and whatever that is there. Don't pretend that's not there, because it is what it is. But that was my experience. That was my experience with those beings, and that was almost over a year ago where that kind of that little bit wrapped up. I haven't had any contact with them since. I did have a lot of channeling and stuff that started to there be the potential for. There's the awareness of energetically being able to invite those energies in, and so that was part of that, what was escalating, and again, this was not the direction I thought I was going. I'd been going in this other direction within the spiritual community, the spirituality. I was still clinging to like this level of escape. I'm trying to escape this illusion. And what a trip. Trying to escape what I'm telling myself is an illusion. That doesn't even make sense. How are that? I don't even want to go into that. That doesn't even, if you're trying to escape an illusion, it's obviously because you don't think it's an illusion. Well, I don't know. You have to look at that for yourself if that's the case. But that got me to some weird places. That level of negation and not wanting to acknowledge that. So this level of channeling started coming online, and then this, let's say, stuff escalated very quick as far as types of subtle perception coming online, and I didn't really know how to deal with that. I didn't really there was still it's like this new level of like curiosity, it's like, do I want? Because it's not going away this, right? So it's like now it's like okay, kind of here to stay. But I don't really want to like, do I want to jump into it or do I not? You know, that was it. It was like, it's kind of like on the fence. And then, you know, can I ignore it? Then more and more started coming online. More awareness of aspects of self, of beings that are astral beings. You know, that was one of the ways things really started opening up, was like this it's like this awareness of like the astral plane, and here it's real simple. It's like everything's a thought. You can look at it as everything's like a thought form, basically. So every energy is, in a sense, in some level, it's its own entity. It's its own energetic thought form. It's its own being. So almost in my own arrogance, it's like I challenged these beings. I found that happen. I did. I mean, I don't want to say almost, because I explicitly, directly challenged one. He whooped my fucking ass. Or I did. And by challenge, I mean take on. You know, take on these energies, and of course, like we do that anyway. Like that's part of life, right? Like we have this karmic backlog, we have these energies, these emotional presentations, these opportunities for that, right? And that's, well, we have our own stuff to deal with. And then you have where you can see how this ties to the collective and how this ties to the whole. I went through this funny phase of where like I thought I was gonna like save the collective, you know, you're gonna save the world. I'm gonna, and this showed up in I remember I became aware of this negative, this sexual distortion energy that was widely manipulating and influencing the masses, like on ridiculous scales. And it's like, oh man, it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna fix that. You know, I'm gonna solve that forever. I'm gonna take on all this energy, all right? So nobody else has to. If that's not playing God, I don't know what is. And it's hilarious that this was even like the state of mind or the frame at that time. But it, you know, it is what it is. So I guess I'm gonna talk about it. So, lo and behold, I start to have these energies come up, and be aware, you know, you've got like some minions, right? You got like, on some levels, like they report back to somebody. And so it's like, all right, well, take me to your master. You know, who sent you? I'm like sitting there one day. I'm not even like meditating, I don't think. I think I was like walking in the bathroom, and it's like, boom. All of a sudden I'm aware, like simultaneously, I'm in this like astral domain, and I'm confronted with this immense being. Really, it was like I was Frodo in Smaug's lair. That was really the experience. It was like all of a sudden, you know, I'm boom, and it was like that. Presented itself as like a dragon. And it did change some forms for a minute, trying to scare and intimidate. I was also aware that this entity was extremely shocked by the fact that I was aware of it and that I was there in its presence in that way. It couldn't hide that, right? And there was a level of maturity, and there was some. I did have, there was a holding and being able to be stable and not, in fear. And I became aware this entity introduced itself as Asmodeus, however you want to pronounce it. He's referenced in a lot of Solomonic literature, and does have a lot of seeming orchestration and power and control over certain energies and manipulated energies that have to do with male and female, and distorting those relationships and keeping certain narratives, and you could say, a lot of fear and guilt and shame tied into sexuality, sexual energies, relationships, to keep relationships fractured and stressed, especially majorly between male and female. So I'm face to face with this, and I could see, the magnitude of like, and this being, and like how long, like, this being had been doing this, and like the reason, also like the kind of distortions and the reasons behind it. So it was real, it was real innocent, right? It was like a real innocent, beautiful conversation, and respect, and holding that in love and forgiveness. Still, there was a certain level of arrogance here after the fact. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna single-handedly liberate you and all your minions from this domain. And that was when, I started to have a lot of sexual appetite come back up. Go figure. A lot of distorted sexual appetite. A lot of old guilt and shame surrounding sex. I also started having stuff come back up with substances, and the manipulation involving that. Possession was something I also became aware of. But the first instance, when I started talking about originally the experience, I did become aware after the fact, where a lot of what I was talking about, the more manic kind of scenarios and confusion and going into all that, I was able to see where that was just a type of possession. It's a type of demonic possession. And so then I'm aware of this, and this got real weird, guys, because I'm in this space of like observing, right? I'm in this space of like, profound peace and awareness and being able to see, but then all of a sudden I've got this new level of like energy and with the substances and with alcohol, and the picture of possession coming back in, of loss of control. And what I was able to see in hindsight, there was also a big tie to this, to the idea of negation, the ideas of escape and emptying out. And so with that, and this is the obviousness of it, guys. You empty out. This is the empty cup. You empty the cup out so it can be filled up with something, right? So I was just in this place where I'd emptied that out, and it was emptied out, but I didn't want to fully fill that back up with the magnitude of love, of Christ, of truth. It was like I still wanted to be in this like hideout spot of like just not really dealing with still. And that, that was when that coincided with a lot of this. And oh man, I went through that for a couple months, and it was like on and off, just like getting my fucking ass handed to me. Like, what the fuck is going on? Am I gonna get out? Like, am I just like wanting to surrender to chaos? It was almost like, and the offer was there. I don't want to downplay this too. I really don't, because I think I've talked about this before, and I feel like I have downplayed it a little bit. And I was terrified because I thought it was presenting itself like I had made a switch or like I had been deceived and was on a service to self path without, you know, and I now I was stuck on it. And it's like, well, you just might as well commit, cuz like this is it. You just really need to go all in, service to self, and just do it. It's like, no, fuck no, you know, no. But then it's like I couldn't get out. I was like, still this site is like going and rolling, and it's got this momentum. And man, this went on, and I was introduced to some understandings that came online. That came into the awareness, like, I don't know, a few months back, and it was more I don't want to say new agey, more of a galactic understanding, dealing with, you know, ETs and interference, and yeah, it's, you know, just our own responsibility and sovereignty for that, but at the same time, having to acknowledge the depth of interference when we see it, right? And so it was like I was trying to ignore aspects that I could see, just so I wouldn't have to acknowledge that, talk about it, or admit that I see that, so I could fit into a safer group or paradigm that I thought, you know, this level of looking at it is a little bit more stable, a little bit more comfortable, and I don't have to acknowledge all these potentialities, factors, timelines, beings, you know, whatever. I can just, you know, I just gotta stay here and worry about Way's world, and, you know, light and love, and hold good space, and yep, light and love, and hold good, you know. And then at the same time, it's like, no, you know, hey, you're supposed to be, you know, you gotta acknowledge this, and it was coming up, like I said, there was these deep ties to some past life stuff, dark stuff, and then trying to put that off on other beings. You know, there was the scene, this was like when the original, like, oh man, like a lot of, kind of lost my train there where I was going with it, but yeah, I didn't know, like I didn't really want to embrace all that. I didn't want to bring that in. I didn't want to look at that. I didn't want to acknowledge that. I didn't want to have to be honest with about that as part of my experience. All right, and there's a lot of pseudo spiritual or metaphysical justifications for this, right? One of the main ones is like, you know, people are just, oh, you're spreading fear. You're spreading fear. Well, that sounds like a projection. Because, you know, where somebody's coming from with something, when they say it, you know, they might be completely neutral. Right? That's our own, how we take that, how it comes up here, that's our responsibility. Right? And now, you know, I can speak on a lot of these things and all these contexts today coming from a place of, you know, neutrality and open love, open heart and love and acceptance. But I do recognize, and at the same time, I can acknowledge the, you know, how it's taken at certain places. Yeah, this isn't, you know, stuff everybody wants to take in. And on the flip side, there's certain people that, you know, they're entirely caught up in this stuff, and they're just, you know, consumed by the excitement and the fear and the insanity and the chaos, you know. So there is, and on that aspect, that's why it's, you know, the intelligence is to stay away from it, because it's seen as that. So I've seen that, and that's part of my experience too. But here it was just showing up as a natural, having to integrate those things, having to look at those things, and open myself up to those possibilities. See where I'd put myself back in a box, where I'd, you know, clung to concepts out of comfort, where I'd shut off new experiences where I'd shut off creation. You know, I'd shut out life. Out of a conceptual idea that this is what I need to be doing to live. Instead of actually learning how to embrace all of life, to be with that truly and see where allow that to fit into its place and puzzle piece and in space and time, however it seems to need to look and be. That's, and allow all the disillusionment to be acknowledged. To see where the concepts and what doesn't serve in the way that I was clinging to it. And that doesn't mean, that I entirely, because at first I did try to throw out the baby, the bathwater, the bathtub, the whole damn house. And throw out grandma too. But it's not, but then the intelligence says no, all right. It's like I'm not clinging to that. That's not clung to in that way. What remains. What remains is that capacity for love, that capacity for that awareness, that capacity to meet and look on anything with the open heart. That's what I've seen the single biggest application and call to responsibility is here. And to be willing to invite whatever comes in that way. I did hear a good and I went through a weird phase too. I did because with this understanding, then it's like, all right, well, I'm trying to take in everything, so now I went to this flip side, and I was shutting everything out. Now I want to take it all, what's all out there, right? And so it's like I just heard somebody comment. So you want to be, have an open mind, but not a gaping mind. The idea is to have an open mind, not turn your mind into the abyss itself. Right? Because the abyss is chaos. Right? If you're emptying out without replacing that with the truth and love and light of spirit, something else is going to get in there. And I've seen some interesting stuff in the spiritual community and marketplace over the years, and it's like, there is a lot of confusion. There are a lot of bad habits, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of teachers that are just teaching from something they're still clinging to fit in, to have that group. There's a lot of people in groups and communities that are just there because they're comfortable, because it's a little bit less fearful there for them than it is out there. It's not really aligned with the truth and love and excitement and creativity anymore. But we have to come to that, and in my life, I had to go through all these things, these layers, these stages, whatever you want to call them. And I don't think we really can avoid some of these in the way that we would like to. I had some, when I was talking about the Asmodeus thing and the sexual stuff, I thought I was going to lose myself for a little bit. I did some shameful shit. What you going to do? So, but we forget these while we're still here, that capacity for these experiences, that contrast, those catalysts are required. Those relationships, that contrast of the polarity of the darkness and the light, and the integration of that, and the bringing that together, and the being able to hold both. And see that, that's so needed. You know, I mean, it took a lot, like just going through all that to really come to the point and be honest, like, oh man, you got to look at this, you got to face this, like all the darkness, not just, and that's the thing too, because it's like real easy, like we want to, like you can go in this place of like, okay, well I'll look at that here, but I'll be damned if I want to acknowledge and look at anything out there in the world. All right. And this is a weird place too, because it's not really any different, right? So if it's all mental, if it's all my mind, one mind, universe is mental. What is that? It's not outside of myself anyway. I'm not going to escape that. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be, watching, the news every day. But we can start to see where we've got these guards up and this resistance. And it's like even something as so simple as somebody like bringing something into conversation or just scrolling, on YouTube or Facebook, and there's like a, negative whatever. It's like, do we need to run for like, oh no, scroll faster. Love it, only love at night. What is that? I mean, my experience, that's fear. And I don't know what it is for anybody else. I wrapped it up as like discernment. Certainly at times I'm like, oh, it's discernment, wisdom, high wisdom. It's not real. But why? Okay, if that's the case, then why am I afraid of it? If it's an illusion and I don't think it's real, why am I terrified? Why am I trying to, forcibly keep that at arm's length? Out of my awareness. And this is stuff I had to acknowledge and face, like, answer these for myself. And then it's like, oh, fuck. You mean to tell me I didn't do as much work yet as I thought? I ain't got rid of all of that? Whatever. But... facing that, the truth of that. I went through years, like I want to go into this too real quick, because this also ties into, it's like, well, okay, like, what, and then what do I do? Let's back to the simplicity here. It's like, oh, it's the same thing, it's the same practice, I'm lovingly, acknowledging this, attentively allowing this in the presence of love. I'm opening my mind and my higher heart to this without judgment, or without judging the judgment. That's without judgment. No. Oh yeah, I said I wanted to go to the energy center things. That was another thing. I'd kind of put that out for a long time because I was just dealing with just kind of non-dual awareness, and wasn't really like, energy centers. You don't need to worry about that. That takes care of itself. And it's not that it doesn't. I don't, there is certainly that can seem to be processed and went through without one consciously knowing that. So to each their own. It may not be something that everybody goes through and goes into. Certainly not necessarily in the same way. So, but here it was an acknowledgement of where that's coming back up to be highlighted, whether it was in like meditation or physical activity or breathing or chanting. That was something that came online too. I didn't go into that. It's like chanting, light language, whatever you want to call it, that started coming through. That was, that was weird. Like, what is this? what is this? But back to the energy centers, one of the biggest things with that was just allowing, learning to witness that, see, what's okay, all right, is there, and then, um, I was open up to higher understandings. I used to have this understanding of there's only, 7 chakras. All right, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's it. Boom. So then, I was introduced to this understanding, and stuff seemed to start to come through with other higher chakras. And it's like, okay, well, is this lining up? Is this my experience? Yes, seems to be. Well, I have to admit that. I have to acknowledge that. I can ignore that for a little while. But then if that's there, that's there. So okay, maybe what I knew before isn't it. Maybe I don't know it all. Maybe there's not just 7 chakras. Maybe it goes up a lot more. One of the systems started working with is was it 12 or 15? Lately, there was an awareness of like the higher heart and the thymus. All right. Of a different center in the gut. Again, this wasn't something like I tried to do. Like, it's just, for me, it came, this happened. This was part of my experience. So I had to start to acknowledge that and integrate that intelligently and no longer run from this stuff, right? Stop trying to deny my own experience and line it up with something else that's already written down on paper or that somebody else is teaching. And that's not to say that some of this stuff, this new stuff's coming in, wasn't already there. But is that, am I clinging to this? And I also see where I'm just, if I'm holding on too long, like it's something, because there can be something new that just comes in real quickly for a time to, boom, boom, let go of it. Move through it. And you'll tell when you cling on for too long. Yeah, I do. It gets pretty uncomfortable. So all this was like a new depth, and before, I guess that's part of where the title for this came from, or an Arcane Ascension. That was where kind of the understanding really switched from like awakening, enlightenment to ascension. And I like the term ascension more because it's it kind of, it keeps with a more you could say moving, growing, alive understanding. Just the word itself. It's continual, eternal. It's like awakening, then what? Enlightenment, then what? I don't say this like in some context of like that here, like, that means anything. It doesn't mean it. With that is just a new level of responsibility, right? Because then it's like you don't have like that capacity for for dishonesty starts to be removed, and those there's immediate consequences for choices. So it's like really, like, okay, is this completely self-absorbed, fear-based service to self mentality, or is this aligned love, wisdom, aligned with the source and light of life, of love, of God? And we're going to have to face all in between where it wasn't that is going to come up. Where you've still been aligned with very negative energies. Where you're still manipulating, where you're still trying to control. Where the fear agenda is driving the show. And within that, we might start to see that all types of understandings, organizations, institutions, religions, understandings may not be what they seemed. All right. What's that? We need to do anything with that? We need to go to war with them? Nah. I mean, you got to deny that, pretend that that's not the case, like, dress it up as like, oh, justify it just because I've been in that? Try to make it sound better than it is? No, that's garbage too. But so that was a whole, huge. God, man, this year's been crazy. Just integrating all that, inviting that all in, and then just really being honest, like seeing, like, okay, what do I like? What do I want to open up with? What do I want to align with? What does excite me? Okay, am I interested in channeling? Am I interested in all this occult shit, this ET stuff? Is this, and then if I'm interested, is it serving? Am I still being responsible within my own awareness, within my own being? Or am I looking for an excuse to hang my hat and get caught up in the world chaos? Throw my chips in with that. But it's gonna come up, in my experience. But it doesn't have to be like this, and it doesn't have to be this hard, uncomfortable. I mean, it will be. I guess that's why I shut up, because it'll be what it is. I was gonna say it doesn't have to be, but maybe it does. Maybe it does have to be. Maybe you need the contrast, right? I did. Sure, I would spare you. Yeah, I don't. There's certain places and frames of mind, states that I don't really recommend. No matter what, capacity you're at. You find out, There's that saying, there are places that even angels fear to tread. And I heard, one teacher I respect and love a lot, she said they call that place Earth. I said to a friend, I said, yeah, there's places that angels fear to tread, but we're not angels. So it's not that I don't fear to tread anywhere, and by God, I hope God always gives me the strength and courage and faith to allow this vessel to move in the direction that it needs to face anything. But the flip side of that is we see where we do have the capacity to acknowledge and see where we're entertaining stuff unnecessarily. And whether I can look back in hindsight and say that was likely the case here. I entertained those things, whether it was unconsciously or consciously. Like, did I have to have that experience? Probably. Would there have been a wiser way of looking at that and seeing that prior? Probably. Yeah. So, I think that's the importance of sharing in this capacity. And that's another reason I like to do this. I've had this, I've had beautiful opportunities to speak to amazing people, teachers, just and to really have share with them and have them share, not only me share and confide, but them share and confide. And I do see a lot of it's not intentional. I don't want to it's there's an intelligence there. A lot of stuff gets swept under the rug and not talked about in certain contexts, and I don't fault anybody for that. There's often an intelligence, but it's this paradoxical place, whether you call it, or whether it looked like gatekeeping on one side, or whether it's the intelligence of not casting pearls before swine on the other. Meat for men and milk for babes, as one of the Hermetic texts say. So you're only ready to take on and hear what you're ready to hear and take on at a certain time. But I do see things drastically evolving and shifting right now to where this context to share and express new levels of depth of understanding, of experience, not just understanding, but levels of experience and authenticity in that experience. To not have that, whatever, to break through that level of not yetness, that level of, because that's still some level of fear, right? That's still, and whether, there isn't, I'm not saying there's not an intelligence sometimes, there is. But we can start to break through that. We can share that. We can break through and share these experiences, these little experiences, whatever. And they'll become less and less arcane in that. And in my experience, as a group, as a collective, the less anything is arcane, the more ascended we will be. So, that's the point. Lift everybody up. With us as one. So, thank y'all for that. I said this is going to be the first episode of an Arcane Ascension, and I look forward. I've got a couple of guests lined up to come on and share in their experience and talk. I'm excited for that. So we'll be moving forward with that here. I'm gonna try to do, I don't know if we're gonna go for bi-weekly, monthly, we'll see. I don't want to make a promise on that as of yet, but it does seem, maybe bi-weekly. I like the way that sounds. I'll try to get videos up as soon as, pretty much as soon as I get them done. I'm not the biggest one for editing and fancy shit like that, so might have to take a little bit more time to do that, make a nice proper presentation for you folk, but we'll see how that goes. And by all means, if anybody has any recommendations or feels inspired to come on and share, reach out. I'm gonna put my email in the link, so you can reach out that way, or any other way if you have my contact information, that'll work too. So thank y'all. Peace and love. Bye.